Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies, both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, those little yellow men get their own movie in Minions. We hang around at the Gallows, and Ryan Reynolds becomes selfless. We also have two home media moments for you. George Lopez heads up the drama Spare Parts, and the Spanish-language film Living is Easy with Eyes Closed will also be tackled. Our triple feature of older movies is Belle, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum as a Listener's Choice Old Classic, and Oscar-nominated Baby Doll. Let's start it off with Minions, a huge $115 million opening weekend, one of the biggest in animation history, and Justin's going to tell us about Minions.
For the third time round, Pierre Coffin, who directed the last two Despicable Me movies and co-directed this one, voices the Minions, primarily the determined Kevin, childlike Bob, and slacker with a ukulele's obsession, Stuart, tasked with the mission of finding a new master, or mistress, that their race can serve, because they essentially killed everyone else by accident. The three find themselves in the hands of the evil Scarlet Overkill, played by Sandra Bullock, and her husband Herb, played by John Hamm, and are sent off to Britain to steal the Queen's crown until things don't quite play out as planned and soon find themselves on the run from their new boss. Now, I've always been of the opinion that the Minions are largely the scene stealers or downright hijackers from the past two movies, so why does this one, their prequel spin-off, miss the mark? Instead of having Pierre Coffin's co-director Chris Renaud, in his place is the Lorax director Kyle Balda, and a lack of really compelling lead characters who are willing to stand on their own. I kind of want to give Coffin a bit of an excuse, given that he's trying to direct and voice the Minions at the exact same time with their gibberish voices, which while being front and center, gets really old really, really fast. But Balda is perfectly fine, seemingly letting these characters serve no purpose than to, serve, which lets nearly every single side character, most notably Michael Keaton and Allison Janney as a family that picks him up on the road very early on in the movie and has one of the few funny moments in the actual movie. The animation's still pretty good, but overall it's just a really cheap ploy to keep the franchise going, more or less a sidestep until Despicable Me 3, which I'm sure will be much better, or at least I hope. I leave the Minions with a C.
Yeah, I call this one spot on. I really did not think the Minions could stand on their own in the movie. Maybe they can, and I can be proved wrong if there's a Minions 2, but this is not the movie. There's just not enough to engage. These guys are much, much better as side characters. I felt that way as soon as I heard that the Minions were getting their own movie. I think there's some funny parts. There's an okay plot. Scarlet Overkill is not nearly as exciting as a villain as the series has seen in the past. Sandra Bullock does okay with the voice work. But because of their nature, the Minions also can't ever really grow as characters. Certainly not in a prequel like this, because they have to start off the first Despicable Me in the same role. And there's also, because of that, no moral, there's no lesson for the kiddies in this movie. It's just...
Look at them.
Just blah.
Yeah.
I think kids will find it funny, but parents, other than the 60s references littered throughout that the kids won't understand at all, I don't know if it's that enjoyable for them. I'll leave it with a C+. Joe?
Yeah, I'm about with you guys on this. I thought the animation was pretty good. I think the movie's very split because most family films, I think, try to find that good balance where you have something for the kids and the adults. I think there's plenty for the kids. There's some for the adults, but they're really right. There really isn't an actual huge story for a lot of growth or a moral or message. You're right. I didn't think about that. That's true. Now, I don't think you can't have them develop within a movie. I mean, look at Monsters University.
You could.
Exactly.
They could definitely have a story, so there's potential there.
But they start out in Monsters U as different people than in Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
In the Minions, they start out basically the same as they started out in Despicable Me 1, so you can't really grow them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like there was definitely something with the journey there. I mean, I kind of feel like that there was something for these characters. They were kind of distinctive. One thing I actually think would actually have served this movie a lot is if they had actually... I was thinking this, because the gibberish does get kind of monotonous after a while. It really
Wildly.
does. I was really can we have subtitles? Seriously. Just a little bit, some of the time, just to mix it up, because some real conversations.
Well, here's my counter argument to that, Joe, from a studio perspective.
Yeah.
That would require children to actually be willing to read this stuff. And for American audiences,
That is a good
that's kind of
point.
scary.
Well,
maybe-
a lot of kids seeing this movie probably can't read yet.
True, but I mean, even like a couple
True.
scenes of some dialogue might be good for some of these slightly older kids.
Well, here's what I think is the bigger issue, Joe. It's the fact that we have so many scenes where they're just by themselves. The Minions are so much better when they have like a human component to play off of.
That's actually my biggest issue with the movie. I think that there is just too much of them by themselves. You have to give them more human traits if you're going to have them carry these scenes. I actually did like the side characters. I thought Scarlet Overkill was a pretty good villain, but I wanted more of her. Like, I thought that she was an interesting character. Her story would have been interesting, but they didn't really interact with her as much as they could have. And
Well, they rushed it.
I know that she's a villain, but even some of her logic in the movie, based upon what they do, isn't really bad. So, I was like, they are kind of helping you. So,
Yeah.
I didn't quite get that. I felt like that was a little bit of a wasted opportunity. So, it was okay. I'm with Dan. I leave it with a C+. It's all right, but it definitely could have been better.
Well, and we talked about this briefly when we reviewed Despicable Me 2 for New Classic last week. But, Justin, you love these Minions. I mean, is there a movie that can serve them with that really annoying patter that they have? I think it's good in small doses, but I never thought for a second that this movie would work. But you love these guys.
No, I think they can have a legitimate movie. It's just they need more like development. They need a story that's going to fit them.
You know what, Justin? One thing I think they could attempt to do, instead of just doing the gibberish all the time, why not actually have a story that's strong enough you can have scenes that have no dialogue, even gibberish, have some almost silent scenes with them.
Well, that's sort of what I was hoping maybe they would do.
Like WALL-E.
Like have it more, be like a WALL-E. I was thinking more of like a throwback to silent movie era.
That'd be fine.
Which like have them do, like the chandelier bit.
Yeah, it was good.
They didn't have to have really any dialogue. I think there was a few kind of, mumbles or whatever, but for the most part, that was a fairly dialogue-free bit or gag. And I was hoping maybe there would be more of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't. There was that and maybe one other scene.
Yeah, I feel like the big thing that this movie needed to take into consideration and just didn't was the fact that they needed to dial it back.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, the gibberish is adorable when it's like 15 minutes of total screen time in a Despicable Me movie. Front and center, if you're gonna have that, at least give them someone to play off of, so there's some entertaining components to it. Instead, it's just them blabbering on, and it starts off kind of okay as a kids movie, and then just gets tedious.
And I would say some of the best scenes in the movie are where they have that interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Really, I mean, most of those best scenes are when they're talking with
and
you.
I'll tell you what, I don't mind if it's just them and they're doing their gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind if they're doing a song number. When they were doing Make Me Laugh, you don't like that? Because like when in Despicable Me 2, when they start singing I Swear at the wedding, I think that's funny because you don't have to know what they're saying. The adults will know the song.
Get the general idea.
kids think it's funny anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the make them laugh part was one of the few things in the movie that I thought both parents and kids could enjoy equally.
That scene I thought was okay. It wasn't entirely won me over. But the prime offender for Minions will go for the extremely tedious post-credit sequence where they sing Revolution.
Oh, I walked out. I was on a deadline, so I had to leave.
Yeah, I didn't see the post-credits.
I didn't see the post-credits.
I didn't know there was one.
But to me, that's sort of irrelevant. If you want to stay for it, you stay. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't... I mean, yes, it's part of the movie, but...
Technically.
Yeah. I mean, the only time I think a post-credit sequence has ever influenced my grade was 22 Jump Street. So, that is here nor there, neither here nor there.
I thought, on a positive note, some of the voice work was pretty good.
Yeah, the voice cast, really good. It's just, I wish they had more to do. Honestly, if they made a spin-off about Michael Keaton and Allison Janney's characters, I'd probably watch it.
Great.
I thought they were hilarious.
I thought they were a lot better than Scarlet Overkill, to be honest.
Yeah,
though.
I agree.
Yeah.
The thing I thought was interesting, though, was that Allison Janney's voice was like really distinctive, and Michael Keaton's was not.
I actually did not know it was Michael Keaton until later on when I was looking at the credits. But yes, Allison Janney, you can pick her out always. Mm-hmm. But
Michael Keaton did a good job of hiding his voice.
Yeah, well, he's done tons of animated work, so that's not that surprising.
It's true.
I was going to say, I didn't know it was Ken, so...
Oh, you didn't?
The first time around, I mean, I knew in the credits, yes, it was him.
Oh, no, that I could tell. I could tell he was Ken from Toy Story 3.
He was more Keaton in that one.
Yeah, he was definitely more Keaton there. But I mean, the role he had in The Simpsons,
Yeah.
I didn't know that was him, Jack the jailbird. I'm sure Minions 2 announcement is right around the corner. Probably by the time we post this episode,
Yep.
there will be an announcement for Minions 2.
Probably.
I mean, you can't make $115 million
Oh.
in
And
your
someone's gonna say
opening
no.
weekend.
These days,
Yeah.
their sequels just is certainty.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
So we'll see. Maybe next time they can get it right. Up next, we've got The Gallows. This was written and directed by Travis Clough and Chris Loffing, and they made it for a mere $100,000. The Gallows is a found-footage horror film and stars an unknown cast, except for Cassidy Gifford, who you might know because she's Kathy Lee Gifford's child. And it revolves around a high school doing a play called The Gallows, 20 years after the same school put on said play, and one of the students accidentally got hung on stage. In the present day, where the movie mainly takes place, a football player named Reese is the star of the show, and his friend Ryan makes fun of him for doing theater, because that's how enlightened we are at this school. And the two agree to break into the school and sabotage the set late at night so he doesn't have to perform. The two end up mysteriously getting locked in, along with Ryan's cheerleader girlfriend, played by Gifford, and the girl Reese likes, and they have to fight for their lives to get out. Now, The Gallows plays off like so many found-footage films and adds very little, even essentially borrowing the plot from a horror satire film we reviewed last year to disastrous D's and F's called Stage Fright. Yeah. The actors are okay, though the one character filming through most of it, this jerk, is essentially a classic bully, so his outcome is quite welcomed, and I don't think anyone cares, when he goes.
Nobody cares.
But I will admit, I got a few chills. I did jump once or twice. It is slightly better than some of this year's D-grade horror films like The Lazarus Effect, so I will grade it accordingly and give it a D+. Joe?
I really feel like it's one of those situations where I don't have much to say about this one. I thought it was okay. I just thought it was incredibly by the numbers. I didn't really think it was that scary. I actually thought the concept... I did like the whole kind of the play within a play sort of thing going based on that was all right. But I just thought it was really goofy. I thought it was really, really silly. So for that one, I couldn't really fail it, even though I thought it was incredibly generic. It added absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing to the found footage genre. I'll leave it with a D. Just because I thought it was kind of entertainingly stupid. But it's just so by the numbers.
It really is.
Well,
and I believe you did not see either of the other real bad ones this year. I know you didn't see Woman in Black 2. You didn't see Lazarus Effect, though, either, did you?
I think you saw it.
You have to remind me what
That's the
it
one with
was.
the dead dog and they bring it back to life.
I don't even remember.
I don't know if you... I know you didn't see Woman in Black 2.
It was pretty forgivable.
But it is very forgettable.
I might have seen it, but I know I didn't see Woman in Black back in January.
Back in January. They were both Ds for me. This is a hair better. Justin?
Well, I feel like I can summarize this review in about 3 words. I get it. You introduce characters who just flat out don't like theater because they're jocks. I get it. You want to make a horror franchise on a shoestring budget. I get it. And POV films are cheap. I get it.
Yeah.
But does this make it a good movie? No. But, gentlemen, here's what I can't forgive. Outside of all these contemporary horror cliches, what I cannot forgive is directors Travis Clough and Chris Loffing taking a real-life person who died tragically and turning him into the boogeyman because they need a horror villain. It's crass, it's inappropriate, and it's disgusting. I leave The Gallows with a giant F.
What happened?
So the guy that died in 1993 is a real person?
1983, Charlie Grimmel. He is a real person.
All right, in the movie it was 93, so...
Could you explain that a little bit?
So apparently the guy that gets hung accidentally in the
story,
in the old
play.
Gallows, in the old play in 1993, is a real life person that died in a high school production of The Gallows or whatever it was.
I feel like plenty of horror movies have used like actual factual things as an inspiration for something. I mean,
most of which are like in name only. Like,
I mean, maybe did they not get the permission from the family to use it or something? Because that's
I looked into that a little bit. I don't know if they got permission from anybody. I did look up the.
It's kind of like saying, I don't know, Sharon Tate got murdered by Charles Manson and somebody's copycats and they put it in a movie. I don't know if that's necessarily wrong. It's just history, right? I'm based on something that I don't know. I feel like that's that's necessarily that unethical. I don't know.
It is unethical that you're taking a tragic death and turning him into a horror villain because you can.
Well, yeah, if they actually use the character's name and turn him into the villain,
they did.
Okay,
watch the credits. It literally says at the end, "In memory of Charlie Grimmel."
But it depends on the context, though.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about it, just having heard it. I mean, if they talked to the family and got the family's permission, I don't know. I mean, that's more messed up almost for the family to say.
It's like if they're doing it
in
a weird way to honor him, because
I feel like they would have to get permission. If this is a real thing,
they could get sued, yeah.
They would have to have gotten permission from the family to
word will
use
get
this
out.
character.
These days, word will get out.
Use this real person.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme if that's the case.
I mean, I don't see there's a way that they didn't get permission to use that likeness and name if that's...
And if they didn't, they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah, if they didn't, then
I'd hope.
all of their $12 million
going to somebody
first
for
weekend is going to go to the family. I mean, they had to get permission, obviously. Now,
which is really weird.
The question is it more messed up of the filmmakers to present the idea or for the family to sign off on it?
That's kind of disturbing,
right?
Actually.
Well, I mean, look at how many historical epics we've reviewed that have flat out had inconsistencies or lied or added new characters just because they could. I mean, The Butler, Class A example.
Yeah, but that's...
Which added an entirely different brother who never existed.
Okay, but The Butler and movies like that...
Massive biopics.
Well, they're or Selma, let's say, I know that's another big one. Mm-hmm. Most of them will say something like, inspired by true events, not the factual story.
Because it couldn't be.
Right. I mean, I think there's a huge difference, obviously, if you're saying inspired. When I hear inspired by the true story, I know going into a movie that about 50 to 60% of it's probably going to be made up.
It's Hollywoodized, yeah.
Very interesting. Either way, the movie stinks, so
yeah.
It's not a fitting tribute to the gentleman anyway.
No.
Whether they signed off on it or not, but that's definitely interesting. All right, well, up next, we're going to talk about Selfless. Joe?
Okay. Selfless, that's how you say it, is a 2015 American science fiction thriller directed by Tarsem Singh, who apparently hasn't done a good movie in a decade or so.
More.
And I guess there's The Fall in there somewhere. Written by David and Alex Pastor. The film stars Ryan Reynolds and Ben Kingsley. Business tycoon and billionaire Damian Hayes, played by Kingsley, is master of his own universe until he encounters a disease that he can't defeat, cancer, or I guess you could say more generically, time. His only hope is a radical medical procedure called shedding, which is kind of odd. I always thought it was the strangest word. Have you ever heard of shedding? Just like he talks to Mr. Titanic, his buddy.
That's right.
In which his consciousness is transferred into a healthy younger body. After the procedure, Damien, now using the alias Edward Hale, a.k.a. Mark, played by Ryan Reynolds now, starts a new life in New Orleans. And he is plagued by disturbing images. When he digs deeper into the body's mysterious origin and the company that gave him the procedure, he learns that there are some secrets that people will kill to keep. This movie definitely has an interesting concept. I definitely like the idea of stretching immortality, what you would do, and kind of adjusting to a new body and getting a second chance at life. I think that from a philosophical standpoint, there's some really interesting themes that this movie kind of touches on a little bit. I think the strongest parts are actually in the beginning of the film when Ben Kingsley's kind of losing his life and adapting to it, and Reynolds gets to kind of expand his acting chops a little bit working with this. The problem is, I think the movie really diverts when it becomes basically a thriller, which, while it's interesting, I think it is just kind of a lower standard story with less stakes. It seems like a less grandiose epic tale, and that's really where it stumbles because the mystery is kind of weak, and some of the other actors that get involved are horrible, namely his... I won't reveal the twist, even though you could probably guess it. There's a female in there that's sort of a romantic lead that's just god-awful to play off of. So Reynolds is trying, but you can tell that he's not entirely sure what to do with this character. Like I said, a lot of cool ideas, definitely some potential. I was interested early on to see where it went, but this movie definitely had a potential to go be a drama, be something more on the lines of Ex Machina, be this really profound idea, but just kind of somehow devolved into a generic thriller with a cool sci-fi twist at the beginning. So really, it's okay. I leave it with a C.
Okay. Before we go to Justin, I'll point out to our listeners that in the almost 2 years we've been doing the show, we've never recorded in a thunderstorm. So I don't know how much of that's being picked up on the mic, but if you hear some loud booming and some rain, that's what's happening outside right now. All right, Justin, let's go to you.
It is what it is.
You know what
Selfless, yep.
Well, I feel like I have to ask, where is the Tarsem Singh from 2006 down, who I really admired? The Fall and everything else. The Cell, his Pepsi commercial that got him on the market.
Oh, we did The Cell? I like that movie.
The Cell, yeah. But Selfless is a lifeless, overlong piece of dribble desperately trying to convince everyone it's smart and just failing miserably. Starring two men both playing an unlikable man who we as the audience are supposed to care about. I'll admit some of the concepts are interesting, and in the right hands I feel like this could have been a really suspenseful Hitchcock thriller like Unknown, but unfortunately it's not. And I really wish Tarsem Singh would find a way to get back to his niche.
You know, not to intercut with you there. Actually, no, go ahead.
To sum it all up, my grade is a D.
Okay. I think it's interesting because you say it's Tarsem Singh. It just took me a second to realize who it was. Yes, I do really like The Cell and The Fall. This is radically different than anything else he does because he is best known for these grandiose visuals and this awesome surrealism. So at the very least, his movies visually look really cool. Even people that don't like his movies, you can't deny just the production values are awesome. So this movie was blah.
Far from that.
It doesn't like now that you
just draw.
Now that I know the connection, I'm like, this was the same guy. I mean, I appreciate him for doing something different, but what a boring, lifeless movie. You're right.
Well, and I think it's funny that you gentlemen both mentioned Ben Kingsley as a co-star. He's not, and he's on the poster as well. He's in this movie the first 15 minutes, and then becomes Ryan Reynolds, and then Ryan Reynolds for the rest of the movie. That was the worst. I was frustrated by that advertising.
You know, that's a good point, but I thought that he did his part for those 15
did,
minutes.
But
They
I
just-
mean,
They should have given him more to
he's
do.
barely a co-star. The premise, I do agree, is intriguing, Joe. You know, you're right on that. The science, though, is really flimsy, and as a result, there's tons of plot holes. There's also some unnecessary elements to pad it out to its almost 2-hour running time. Specifically, Joe, that romance subplot, weird nonsense.
Which is
Just throw
borderline
that
creepy.
out. Throw that out. It is creepy. It's bizarre. I also think it's a weird performance from Reynolds. I am never convinced in this whole movie that he is
Ben Kingsley.
Ben Kingsley in Ryan Reynolds' body. I just don't buy it. And I like Ryan Reynolds a lot. We did a top 5 about him, and I had to cut some off because I like the man so much. But this was one of his worst, I would say, performances.
It was off.
He could get Razzie for this.
But still, through it all, I can't say I was bored. So I'm going to leave it just under you, Joe. It's a C-. It's not good, but
I kind of wanted to see where it went.
yeah, I mean, it didn't end up going anywhere, but I was intrigued as to where it might go.
I kind of liked the villain, even though he was pretty ultimately generic. The performer was pretty good for him.
Yeah.
I thought he was a
Yeah, he
decent,
was fine.
decent bad guy.
Yeah, the Mr. Andrews from Titanic was great, although they threw a couple extra things in his character that didn't need to be there either.
Yeah,
Not
there
even
was
remotely.
a couple
You know.
subsets to add some drama. I mean, I get what there was a little decent subplot. I guess they were kind of hinting his relationship with his daughter, and then the
Which goes basically nowhere.
nowhere. Well, kinda does because Ryan Reynolds.
But it holds like
daughter,
no water. I was hoping like they'd try and find some way to like work that into like the conspiracy and Ryan Reynolds visiting her frequently,
But no,
so
it
we don't
just-
have to have the dumb love interest.
No, but it's just another
it's
issue
it's there.
they want to add to it. But yeah, that's the thing. This movie doesn't commit to anything. There's like different
No.
ideas for different types of stories it can tell, but nothing's ever fully fleshed out.
And then we'll have these like basically random action sequences strictly because, well, he was in the military. He must know how to fight.
I was thinking that was kind of forced in too. Now, I did like the action sequences, but
Yeah, they weren't bad.
But they were kind of out of place with everything else, like random action sequence. So it's a big conspiracy, but then it's a random love story.
I'm glad that they at least explained his marksmanship, though. Because in that one scene when they're trying to get out of the house, he's just like busting caps at everybody and hitting all of his targets.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm glad they at least eventually like explained what was happening there.
Yeah, that was kind of
Because
cool.
I did kind of think like, okay, what is like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like he retained everything else. You know, his whole memory's gone, but those military skills, they're on
I know.
point. You know, it's perfect, right?
Yeah, it's
Kind of selective, isn't it?
It's got a lot of problems for sure. But Joe, I'm with you. It's not boring. It just isn't well done.
It's kind of interesting. It's an interesting
Yeah.
failure, I would say.
Okay, that's a fair way to put it. Up next, we have actually 2 home media moments that we're going to go over, and the first one is a foreign film called "Living Is Easy with Eyes Closed," and Justin's going to tell us about that.
All right, so there's a couple interesting accentuations here. So I apologize if I butcher any actor's pronunciation,
We forgive you.
but just
And I won't know the difference.
Just a quick note to our listeners. Javier Camara plays Antonio, a high school teacher with Beatles obsession, on the road to Almeria in hopes of meeting his idol, John Lennon, who's filming a movie there. Along the way, Antonio picks up 2 runaways, a young girl with a baby on the way named Balin, and a boy trying to escape his intolerable father named Wanjo. I hope that's the correct pronunciation. And having a series of adventures, bring them all closer and helping them through their predicaments. Well, I won't pretend that we haven't all seen a story similar to this one, but what puts it up and keeps it moving is its charismatic lead and a genuinely engaging storyline. The story unfolds at a mostly believable rate, and Camera's dedication to the Beatles is rather infectious. I've always liked the Beatles, so I'll plead a little bit of bias here, but I did find his way of working it in there, here and there, relatively enjoyable, and hearing the quotes, always pretty good. Though my biggest issue is, I feel like as we get closer to the end, it gets stranger and stranger and has a couple odd twists and turns, particularly when it becomes a sort of strange love triangle. But for the most part, I was entertained. I leave it with a B.
Okay. I do think this is a really good character study. I think there's a lot of interesting people and some originality here. I think the dynamic, though, between the 3 main characters is great. I think it's at its strongest when it's all 3 of them together, though I think that all of the scenes with just 2 of them in any of the combinations are also good. I think that, they all play well together and sort of, one-on-one. The John Lennon plot that sort of threads the whole thing together is actually, I think, one of the weaker elements. I think it's okay, but, where he's, going to visit their house and, getting the flower pots thrown at him by Cynthia Lennon. It's I don't know. But I think the situations that arise surrounding it, like when they're actually trying to get on the movie set, are interesting. On the whole, I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I leave it with a B+. Joe?
Pretty much with you guys on this one. I think that it flows very well for a road trip movie. Actually, I think the characters were very believable and likable. And you're right, there's definitely some chemistry there. I think that's easily the strongest element. I also really liked the way it was shot and edited. I thought it just kind of added to the low nature of it, just kind of very down to earth. It was simplistic, but it just was charming. The John Lennon plot, I thought it was okay. I didn't really think it was I kind of wish it was interwoven a little bit stronger in a way. I felt like it could have used a little more of that, but I thought it served its purpose. I thought it was really more about these characters interacting, and I don't know. I think it was some of the humor that was derived from that, though. The plots was definitely pretty enjoyable. I don't know.
It's out of control.
I thought that was kind of cool. So I don't know. I'm with you, Dan. I give it a B+. I thought it was a pretty enjoyable movie. Maybe not perfect, but
no.
I wish there was a little more of the Beatles obsession, to be honest. I think we could have breathed some full life into it, to kind of give it that extra quirk.
It won all of the Spanish Academy Awards that year, though.
I know.
Really?
This was really
Best Picture. I mean, it was the submission for the actual Academy Awards.
I believe it's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It is, but I think it's only from 5 reviews.
Well, they all
it
love
it doesn't have many in there.
Hey, 5's 5.
5 is 5. You're right on that. I can't deny that claim, Joe. 5 is definitely 5. But no, they submitted it as the Spain
Best
foreign language movie. It didn't make the cut for the Oscars, but it won all of the. I think they're called the Goya Awards.
So is it Best Picture in Spain?
Yeah, Best Picture, Best Actor, won,
Nice.
I think, the screenplay. So, yeah, all that.
Cool.
I don't think it's... I mean, we've certainly seen better Spanish language films.
I think so.
But, you're right, Joe. For, a road trip
It does the job.
comedy, it definitely does the job.
Felt good to me.
Yeah.
It's a really good feel-good movie, so I could see why it's sort of an Academy Award-winning movie for over there. I could see it.
Yeah. Yeah, the acting I thought was really good. Justin, you didn't like the sort of love triangle aspect of it?
I thought it just sort of went at a gigantic, strange angle, and then instead of really exploring it further, we get one hint at it, and then we get another swerve. It's interesting, but they don't give you enough time to play with it. Instead, you just get 20 minutes of material, and then we're at John Lennon.
Yeah, it came on sort of out of nowhere, at least with the girl and the young kid.
Definitely.
Her and the teacher, that was sort of... They were building toward that.
Yeah.
Joe, how did that grab you, that part?
Honestly, I thought it was kind of forced. I thought it was just kind of there to add another element to kind of make it a little more interesting. I didn't think it was necessary. I thought that with the teacher it just made more sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it was fine. You can have it in there. It was kind of one of those things you expect, but I just felt it was unnecessary. It was okay. It didn't really bother me, though. It detract from my grade at all.
Right. Yeah, mine neither, but it did sort of come out of nowhere.
I guess my biggest issue with it is it turns what was basically a mentorship between the three of them into something more, which feels almost like a betrayal to their characters in some regards.
They were trying to add something more complex to give it another element, I guess, another layer. Maybe if it was fleshed out as well as it could have been, I don't know. But sometimes they'll do that to interject more drama, potentially.
I mean, they did all just kind of meet, though. So, I mean, how much
real
is
connection,
that mentorship? I mean,
genuine?
Really?
Yeah. Sort of spur of the moment.
No, but I mean, also, in that same regard, it should focus more on the mentorship because they're all here, and obviously the teacher's probably like the smartest one among them. Mm-hmm. But taking this whole romantic thing into that is like, okay, now we have this incredibly awkward mentor-student relationship, and then student-student relationship.
I didn't really think of him as a mentor, though. He's just giving them a ride. And yes, he is smarter than them, and he is schooling them on, the English language and all that stuff. But I mean, I didn't really... It's not like they're his students.
No.
Well, they sort of become his students in a way.
In a way, I guess. That's
in the basic mentor-teacher
yeah,
sense.
I suppose
for the journey. I mean,
I guess. All right. Well, the second home media moment actually has another sort of foreign language connection. George Lopez started this new production company and inked a deal with Lionsgate, and this movie was shot in Mexico. And this is Spare Parts we're going to talk about. It's a drama based on a true story about 4 students from the underprivileged Arizona school Carl Hayden Community High who enter a national robotics competition at the college level. Lopez plays a substitute teacher and the group's advisor. Jamie Lee Curtis plays the principal, and Marissa Tomei plays fellow teacher and love interest Gwen.
And Aunt May.
And the new Aunt May, yes, correct. New sexy Aunt May. Director Sean McNamara, no stranger to uplifting teenage stories since he helmed Raise Your Voice and Soul Surfer, does a fine job here, and some of the underwater robotic scenes at the competition are really cool. But what really sets this one apart is that the kids here are all illegals. Now, the film doesn't do enough with that, unfortunately, but it does add an interesting wrinkle or two. I thought Lopez did a decent dramatic job here, spreads his acting wings a little bit. Not used to seeing him, really not being funny. But the entire subplot he has with Tomei as the romantic thing, and really her whole character, is kind of unnecessary. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis sort of fills the necessary role that Marissa Tomei has. It's a pretty good movie, but certainly not a great one. I'll leave it with a B-. Justin?
We're used to underdog stories on the show, but what puts this one above the by numbers mediocrity
Ooh, I like that movie.
is its willingness to actually explore some of the grittier concepts it touches on. Please take note, Mark Farland, USA.
Oh.
Now, don't get me wrong, the movie's still guilty of cliche and goofiness, such as with the very short and totally unbelievable role of Jamie Lee Curtis, who essentially spits on all the talent her dad was known for, but has those dramatic... But still
What's wrong with Jamie Lee Curtis?
I like her.
Her character is basically a cartoon character, but still has those dramatic portions and a pretty solid performance from Marissa Tomei and George Lopez, who I gotta admit I admire the fact that he took a dramatic angle, and I think it paid off.
Yeah, I think he did really well in this movie.
I'm not gonna say it's the most original thing I've seen, but I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed myself while watching it. I leave with a B- as well.
Joe?
This movie is essentially Mexican October Sky. Now, I like October Sky a lot, so I will kind of like this movie. I mean, really, it's, as you guys said, it kind of is very by the numbers in the sense that it has a lot of those cliches, a lot of those, feel-good melodramas for this based on a true story aspect. But, I think for the most part it does work. I think the characters are kind of acceptable in the situation. You certainly like them. You want to see them succeed. And I think what surprised me the most was that, it's easily my favorite George Lopez performance that I like, for certain, my favorite, because I think outside of his show and some of his stand-up, I don't think I've ever seen really many performances with him live action anyway.
No, he doesn't do a lot of movies, to be honest.
So, yeah, I really thought he did a good job with this, actually better than I was expecting. I thought, you're right, Marissa Tomei, kind of unnecessary, but she was fine.
Usually is.
Yeah, she's always fine. I didn't dislike her performance, certainly. I just thought the character was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, kind of. I agree. I think Jamie Lee Curtis does serve the role well. I guess she might be a little unbelievable, sure. But then again, considering the type of school she's in, I I don't know. I've seen some principals that can be pretty tough in certain situations. So maybe something stretched the border, but who knows? I thought everybody did well in the movie. It was fine. It was fun. I'm actually a little higher than you guys. Leave it with a B.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis goes for the gold a little bit with the cartoonishness towards the end. But, I mean, I think she's excited, that her school's looking good. And I don't know. I mean, we kind of see this character a lot in movies like this where, the underprivileged kids do well and the principal's very excited about it. She goes a little overboard, I guess, but you can imagine somebody in her position might be excited.
It's believable. I've seen some aspects of it.
Yeah.
It happens.
No, but I mean, it gets like eccentric, like in early on when she basically forces one of the students to work with George Lopez. Totally don't buy that scene. Not
Why?
even,
I could see
because the way she's acting the entire time, it's like, did you get your entire principal playbook from watching an episode of Magnum P.I.?
It's in a crime-ridden school. A lot of the kids are underprivileged, and she's trying to encourage them, so she's going to be tough on them.
I mean, I'll admit that was a horribly directed scene, but
I didn't think so. I really liked it, actually.
I thought it was okay.
It was comedic,
It didn't.
they were trying to play it for laughs, and it just didn't make any rational sense. It was not well written. It was not well acted. It wasn't even that funny.
I don't know. I thought it worked. I thought it functioned well. I mean, I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about it, but
I didn't think about it whatsoever. It made no impact on me. It was fine.
Which is why I think the scene just should have been excised completely. It held no water, and it was basically cartoon fluff.
Well, but we had to get him into the robotics club somehow.
Just have him like go in, disappear with the principal, and then come out and it's like, oh yeah, we took care of it.
Well, that sounds super boring. I don't want to watch that movie.
yeah, I think it was a little more interesting. To see
I
the
mean, I
threats.
think at least they did something with it.
Otherwise, Jamie Lee Curtis would just be sitting around being the standard principal, and then it'd be less interesting. Honestly, you're right. They made it more cartoony just to add a little more spice.
Because we have this like gritty story, and then all of a sudden, oh look, here's Jamie Lee Curtis about to go psycho on a rebel student.
It's not that gritty of a story, though.
No.
It's dramatic.
Drunken dad, illegals.
It's pretty standard. It's just practically Disney.
I mean,
It's like a slight cut above Disney,
it's
but
pretty much a Disney family.
It is.
High school type film.
They
It
touch on
really
some
is.
things, but it's.
Well, like
they
I
do
said,
a lot more than McFarlane did. I'll just say that much.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I like McFarlane better than this, though.
I definitely like McFarlane better than
Personally.
this. I know Justin hates on it all day and night, but that was grittier, I would say, because of the violence in it.
They touched on.
They were
more,
in a gang violence neighborhood. This is just kind of
They dance around it. In
They're
this one.
illegals, and there's some little crime here and there.
They
Some
could get picked up
graffiti.
any time, man.
Yeah,
Like,
but
really?
I mean,
Not this doesn't work.
McFarlane actually had gang violence, and I mean, I'm not going to get into another McFarlane discussion, but I think the term gritty would be, of the two, more associated with that film than this one.
I think so too.
All right, well, before we get to our triple feature of older films, we do have a couple of news items to talk about. The first one here I'll mention, and that is this new deal that Paramount Pictures inked with AMC theaters and Cineplex theaters. What they're doing is, the window of theatrical release to home video is a lot smaller all the time. And now, 2 Paramount movies are going to be available for digital purchase 17 days after opening in less than 300 theaters. What the deal stipulates, though, is because of the short window, Paramount is going to give those theaters a percentage of the profits from the digital downloads, because obviously, well, if I can get this movie in less than 3 weeks at my house, why am I going to rush out to the AMC to see it?
You gotta hurt the ticket sales.
Right, you're going to hurt the ticket sales. So, just wanted to pick your brains, I guess, and see what you thought of that. Is that a good idea for the movie industry? Is it questionable? Joe, what do you think of that?
I think it's kind of forward thinking in a way. Personally, I mean, I say good on them for actually thinking of the theaters. Because you got to keep the theaters alive. I think that obviously the movie theater experience is something we should definitely keep. But I really think there should be more of a window, honestly, just in general. I think that eventually we'll get to the point where you can practically produce these movies instantly. I mean, you could release them digitally automatically anyway. Mm-hmm. So I think that there should be a little more of a window. 2 weeks seems a little quick to me, but if they're going to do it, at least they're giving the profits.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think?
I'm actually okay with this. I feel like there's a decent synergy here, and I think it gives a new perspective on things. I mean, look at how many people in our lives say, I don't watch TV, but I have Netflix. Streaming's going to become a more and more prominent part of our lives, and I feel like it only makes sense that these distribution companies are going to try and find ways to do that. And I also think that opens up the door for a lot of more independent films that are only going to come to like New York and LA. And that's how we've seen a couple of the movies that we reviewed for the show. I mean, Frank, Welcome to Me,
Maggie.
Admittedly, not all of them have been winners, but it's still awesome that people have that opportunity at their fingertips now instead of having to like drive over 100 miles to a random movie theater and hope that they can make it in time.
Or wait a year.
And hope that it gets on DVD. I think it adds a whole new availability for people, and I think it's good they were thinking of the companies, and I really hope that more come through with it, because I feel like this could be a new thing. I think the movie theater experience is important, but I also think that we forget that there are some movies that really do demand that movie experience. Guardians of the Galaxy, gotta see it in theaters. Jurassic World, gotta see it in theaters. I'll See You in My Dreams, you can wait for DVD.
Well, but I think that's the problem that a lot of these theaters are facing, because most of the multiplexes have 12, 14, 16 screens. They can't all be San Andreas. They have to have Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, too.
Some variety.
But if nobody's going to see it because they can get it in 2 weeks on DVD, I think that really hurts the theater. So I can see both sides of the coin. And there are movies, certainly, that, right, we've had to watch, on demand or whatever, because they don't come anywhere around here. But, I mean, if I was a theater in New York and I ran all of these, independent movies, but you're going to put them out on DVD in a couple of weeks, I don't think I'd be too pleased with that.
Hurts them, the independent
It
theaters.
really hurts them.
Absolutely.
What say you about that? I mean...
But also look at another movie we reviewed, Better Living Through Chemistry, which was released on video on demand the week we saw it in theaters. I don't think that damaged the sales in an overly dramatic way.
Of course it did. That is notorious for being one of the lowest grossing movies we've ever reviewed on this show.
But I mean, locally speaking.
Locally speaking, I can't say. I don't know how it did. It was only there a week. I couldn't have done that well, Justin.
I liked it, though.
I would love to see the Amy Winehouse movie right now. But they only released that to theaters. They didn't put it on demand at the same time. But that made the demand for it higher, and in its second week of release, it expanded to over 300 theaters. So I think there is something to be said for, if there's a demand for it, the theaters will get it regardless of whether it's on demand or not. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all develops, as the years go on here. And as, like Justin said, I mean, everybody's streaming now and watching things on demand. So.
Why don't they just test the theater run, and then if it does poorly, release it for streaming quicker?
That's a model that I think I would go with more.
Because that way you're not going to lose much. I mean,
right.
These days it's not like you have to produce film and port it in. So just test it out. If it does well, keep it in theaters as long as possible. And if it does poorly 1 week in the theater, hey, well, you can save your money at Redbox or whatever.
Yeah. True.
So it could work.
No one's a lesser.
Well, and gone, obviously, are the days of having a movie in theaters for 6 months. Frozen was still in the top 10 when it came out on DVD. That could have stayed in theaters easily another month or two before coming out, but Easter's coming. We better release it so everybody can put it in their Easter baskets. So, all right. Anyway, there was another interesting news item. Justin, why don't you tell us about that?
Well, in a recent interview, Dustin Hoffman gave a fairly interesting quote, calling television the best it's been, however, also calling movies the worst state they've been in about 50 years. A person who's always had a little bit of mixed feelings about Hoffman. I appreciate that he's a method actor, but sometimes I think he commits a little too far. I understand a little bit where he's coming from. Look at movies throughout the years. 60s, 70s, probably even a little bit in the 80s. A lot less movies, a lot more thought put into them, and we got some really deeper concepts. In present day, we're just churning and churning and churning. We're putting movies on shelves and bringing them out like 3 years after they were supposed to come out and hope that nobody knows that they're terrible. I can't fault him for saying that we're getting so much garbage.
Well, I think this statement is only relevant in terms of box office. Because, yes, there's a lot of Transformers movies, and there's a lot of like we talked about with Minions. It's not that great of a movie, but it made a killing, so obviously they're going to make another one. I think it's all about the bottom line. But I will say this. I think in terms of big budget blockbusters, this has been one of the best years in a while. Jurassic World was great. The second Avengers was pretty good. Inside Out was fantastic. I mean, I think there's a lot of good product out there. And Dustin Hoffman himself was in my favorite movie of last year, Chef.
Which was an independent film, I might add.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. But it's an independent film that did very well. I mean, it made like $40 million. It was, fair. It didn't make $1 million. It was in a lot of theaters, and it did very well for an independent movie. Look, Whiplash was a great movie. Just because every movie isn't Whiplash, I can't say that the whole state of the film industry is terrible. I will say there's a lot of garbage.
Which I feel like shouldn't be the case. I feel like we're churning out all these generic movies just because we can, and because of that, audiences are getting used to it and are just going because they can, and they keep getting funded. Why do we have 4 Transformers movies? Why is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles getting a sequel? I could go on all day.
Well, but I also think that speaks to what we just talked about with how quickly things turn around on DVD. Look at all of the movies we've reviewed this week. Other than Minions, The Gallows and Selfless are probably going to be out of theaters within days of us putting this podcast up.
That's probably accurate.
And pretty much forgotten.
And we see that time and time again. Every week almost, there's at least one movie that is the case for. Joe, what do you think of his comment and everything else?
Well, I think I watched a video or read a blog or something about this similar concept, and it's just kind of that it's sort of a reflection of audiences. I mean, really, they're just giving the people what they want. Now, admittedly, it's not the deepest, most intriguing entertainment, but obviously, people love franchises. They're pumping them out. It's working. They're going to keep making them as long as they can. But it's certainly easier to make a movie for an average person than it was 50 years ago, where unless you worked for a major studio, it would have been nigh impossible.
Right.
Or you can make something like Unfriended now, and that's kind of impressive. So, even though the movie was a bit iffy. But still, it's impressive that you can do that with relatively little. I mean, you can make practically nothing and even get, through Kickstarter now, $50,000, boom, you made a movie. So it is impressive, and there's definitely a lot more out there. And I think that's the issue, is that we do see a lot more of it. I think there's always been bad stuff. There's always been crap. There's just more of it now. I mean, you're right. I mean, if you look back at the 60s, 70s, 80s, basically like Hoffman's heyday. Yeah, there were some great movies, some classics.
But there was also a lot less movies, which is why they were around for months.
That's true. That is true.
Yes, because they didn't debut on VHS for 9 months after they came out.
Yeah, and that's my point. That technology is definitely a factor there, too. And you're right, there were less movies back then. But there were still a lot of bad movies, I'm sure, made through each decade that are completely forgotten now.
Leonard Part 6.
Exactly. The point is, there's bad stuff. There's always been bad stuff. Maybe even the majority, I would say, has probably been average at best. It's just the ratio of things. There's only going to be so many amazing classics anyway. The problem is there's just more of them now. Is all it is, really. So I don't know. I think his statement. I mean, it's true that TV is definitely where things have been at for quite a while now, because honestly, for some reason, they've been putting more writing and time into it, and also actors are realizing it's just better paychecks for them.
Well, steadier
income
work as well, or steadier
income. Not to mention with the growing trend of these anthology TV shows like True Detective, American Horror Story,
and also streaming plays a factor with that as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I feel like the major reason that TV is having such a big boom here is because there is an infinite amount of options. There's hundreds of cable channels, many of them doing original programming. Now you've got Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, all doing original content.
It's true.
There's just no shortage of good things. There's a lot of crap, but guess what? There's something for everyone. You know, if you like stupid reality TV, there's a ton of that. If you like thought-driven, legal show, there's that. There's, comedies. There's so many things, and they're just turning them out because there's so many different production companies. There's only so many movie studios, and there's a lot of local ones, I guess, that you could kickstart or whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, is anybody going to see that movie not really.
It's also an easier way to keep people interested, too, because if you're funding a different idea and it's doing kind of okay, you can pitch something else, get another season going, and you could potentially have it going a lot longer with less of a budget. Whereas if you have a movie or even a movie franchise, put a lot of money into it, doesn't work. Even if you wait a couple years, maybe interest has waned.
Right.
You know, maybe like with Spider-Man, you know? People might not be willing to wait for it if it doesn't do so well.
I was going to say Tomorrowland, even.
Yeah, what a shame.
Tomorrowland, they sunk a lot of money into it, and it was a pretty decent movie. But, some people saw it. I mean, it didn't do horribly, but it quote-unquote bombed.
I'll be honest.
Based on its budget.
If Tomorrowland had come out in the 80s or 90s, I think it would have been a hit.
I think it would have been, too.
Because it was entertaining, but it was also thought-provoking. Mm-hmm. At a time when it was more accepted. I mean, Jurassic Park.
Right. But I guess the point is, if I'm going to plunk down $10 or $12 for a movie, I need to know if it's good. Whereas on TV or Netflix or wherever you're getting your TV,
pay little to nothing.
You pay little to nothing, and if you don't like whatever you're watching after 20 minutes, you click it off and you turn on the next thing.
You buy that ticket, you got to invest.
Yeah, you better sit there through the whole movie to get your money's worth.
You can try and get your money back, but what's the point?
So, I don't know. It's an interesting quote. I can't agree with it completely, but I mean, I see where he's going with it, I guess. All right, well, let's get to our triple feature of older films. We start off with new classic Belle. This is one, Joe, we're trying to knock out a lot of these that you did not get to review on the original run. Mm-hmm. So, Joe, let's hear from you first on Belle.
Finally, the Belle, the one the theater screwed me over from seeing. I'll never forget it.
You went and they changed their time on you.
I'll never forget that.
What was the Rover?
Nope, it was Belle.
No, it was Belle.
I wasn't particularly interested, but I think Dan said, no, you should check it out. Did, and that just screwed me over on the time. So finally get to see it, almost 2 years later. But Belle is a 2013 British period drama directed by Ama Asante. No relation?
I don't believe so.
It'll be interesting. Written by Misan Sage and produced by Damien Jones. It stars Gugu Mbatha Raw and Tom Wilkinson and Miranda Richardson as well, who's always great. The film was inspired by the 1779 painting of Dido Elizabeth Belle beside her cousin Lady Elizabeth Murray. The fictional film centers on Dido's relationship as a young woman with an aspiring lawyer and is set at a time of legal significance as a court case is heard on what became known as the Zong Massacre, when slaves were thrown overboard from a slave ship and then were filed with his insurance company for their losses. Lord Mansfield rules on the case in England's court for 1786, and his decision seemed to contribute to the abolition of slavery in Britain. This, of course, plays to Belle herself being of African origins and raised by this family, trying to kind of deal with the nobility and the social stigmas, getting marriage, and having a lot of different drama. I think this movie was very good. You could call it, Dan. I did like it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was very genuine in its representation. I love the costumes. I mean, you can always sell me with the look of a film when it's set in a different period. I mean, you've got some great actors here. I mean, Wilkinson, pretty much always good, top of his game as usual. Tom Felton of Draco once again plays, an guy in a couple scenes. Mm-hmm. Does a good job there, just kind of just representing a lot of the Abbott races of the time. But this movie is really, really interesting. It has a powerful story, I think, both on the dramatic sense with Belle's struggles, trying to deal with being just a person in general, as well as to deal with all the racial issues as well, and her romance. And it also deals with the whole legal aspect too, which I find fascinating from a historical standpoint, because I actually didn't know much about that. That would be technically where the whole idea of abolishing slavery of African slaves began. So in England, it began because England did get rid of slavery significantly before the U.S. did, and this would be why that happened. So it's kind of a trickling effect later on. But it works on a number of different levels for the most part. I do think that the romance element is probably the weakest part of the movie. And I don't think it's bad per se, but I found myself really torn because I really liked Belle and I really liked her story, but I actually really liked the legal story as well. And I kind of almost felt like there were two separate movies that were just kind of coalesced. I feel like they could have picked one or the other and would have been fine. But they should have had one as a background piece or the other. But obviously, it's Belle's story. It's presented fairly well, but it is taken away a little bit because of all the legal aspects, which take out almost half the movie, really. Mm-hmm. So, overall, performances were good. Story is very good. Wish there was a little more focus on Belle or on the legal part. But other than that, I thought it was very good. I leave it with a B+.
Okay. Yeah, this is a great movie, and I'm always apprehensive when I go into a period piece because sometimes I find them very boring, but we've had a few recently that I really enjoyed, and this is probably the best of them. I think Wilkinson gives maybe my favorite performance of his here. I think he's fantastic. I think Mbatha Raw is fantastic as Dido Belle, and I do agree that the romance is probably the weaker element of the story, but I do think it showcases very well her
Situation?
Well, her situation with specifically her sister.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because she is really trying to be Miss Thing here, and she's getting all the attention, but really, you know, Belle is the one that the movie's about, so we're focusing on her.
Well,
and her relationship with the sister really, I mean, they were best friends, and then that kind of tears them apart, I think, is great. But the romance itself, like, I don't know. Like, I like to see Felton, he's a jerk, as always.
But he only has like 2 scenes.
But yeah, he only has a couple scenes. Like, they don't, like you said, Joe, they don't flesh it out enough.
No, I mean, I think once again the relationship with the sister was good, but that could have even had more time.
I agree.
Right, it's important, but
I agree.
But even with her, I felt like she was a little underdeveloped, honestly.
She was. I don't know how much more we needed, though, other than she's a priss and she's really sweet, but she kind of is torn with her own family.
But you could have presented a little more. I mean, think about it. The crux of the painting is kind of those two women and their relationship with each other. So,
and I also think that speaks to their dynamic. They're never. Yes, you're right. It does sort of tear them apart, but it never like completely keeps them apart.
No, they don't like hate each other.
No.
But they, fight like siblings would. But I do think because of that they focus a little too much on the law aspect of it. I thought it was a very important part of Belle's story, obviously, and that romance I liked more than the suitors coming in. But I just think this is a very good movie, and it really is a story that is largely unknown. I didn't know really anything about it. For me, I leave Belle with, like I did before, an A-. Justin?
Rewatches can make a world of difference. However, they can also keep emphasizing similar issues, which is something that I find myself experiencing on the second viewing of Belle. The film wants to explore the life of this young girl trying to work her way into a white-dominated world and questioning everyone's ethics, and I won't deny the fact that it's a great performance from Mbatha Raw, but the handling in the romantic portion is so dry and nowhere near as compelling as the second story involving the Zon massacre and her role in trying to uncover this, bringing a whole different aspect of what really pushed slavery out of Britain. I think it's a much better movie than I gave it credit for on the first go around. However, I still do think that the fact that it's basically 2 stories pushing against each other and one becoming triumphant over the other one significantly is still a big issue. I raised my grade to a B+.
Okay.
That's pretty good. B originally?
B originally, yes.
It's not too bad.
I mean, the romance is not handled all that well. I mean, it's a semi-important part of her story, but you're right, it's not what should be the main focus. But the first half of the movie is so focused on her place in the family and everything that I feel like the suitors coming to see her just sort of feeds into that part more.
Hey, I don't mind that.
You know?
I actually think that was fine. If you want to do a whole movie primarily around that and keep the Zon case as kind of a background to structure it as a first reference, I think that could be good.
Here's the problem with that, though, Joe. The movie's trying to shoot for that, and it's just not working.
No, but the reason it fails, though, is because they spend too much time with the Zon case, which I ultimately found was more interesting. And I kind of wanted another Amistad. Like, if they did seriously, if they did a whole movie about the Zon case, like the way they did here, just add the rest of the runtime there and maybe make Belle an interesting side character almost, that could have been great, too. So that's the problem, is that the Belle story is good, but it's not really entirely about her. You could tell they wanted to do 2 very separate movies that kind of interrelate. And maybe that romance was supposed to connect them, but just, I don't know, pushed away or dumb it down and add more to fuse the direct connections between the storylines.
I mean, I'll give you this. Even though I did find the romantic storyline very, very dry, I did really, really, really like the payoff at the ending. I do think that part comes together very nicely.
I think the whole family aspect of it is good, though. You know, Wilkinson plays a crucial part, obviously, in that. I do agree that there could have been 2 separate movies here.
That's the problem.
You know, but I liked both of them. So, if you combine it into one movie, I'm not going to dislike it.
No. They're two very good halves of other movies.
You're right.
The same one. That's the thing. I agree.
That's a good way to put it.
That's how I felt about it. I can't say any of it was bad, but did it quite mesh? Not exactly.
Okay.
No, it was well shot and acted. Just one was significantly more compelling than the other.
I thought so, which was unfortunate because the movie's about Belle.
Right.
And so it's a little less about Belle than it perhaps should have been. Mm-hmm. But it was still good, certainly.
Okay, well, let's do our old classic now. This was submitted to us by listener Melissa for our listener's choice this month, and that is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. This is a musical farce comedy from 1966. It's based on the Stephen Sondheim stage musical. It takes place in ancient Rome and tells the bawdy story of a slave named Pseudolus, played by Zero Mostel, who attempts to win his freedom by helping his young master, played by Michael Crawford, win the girl of his dreams from a house of ill repute next door. Phil Silvers, Jack Gilford, and Buster Keaton have supporting roles. This was a very interesting listener's choice for me specifically, as the listener that suggested it, Melissa, saw the stage version of this the week before with me and suggested that we should watch the film version for the show and, sort of gauge the differences. And it was definitely interesting for me to compare the two. Some of the songs were completely different, and the movie version uses a lot of these like trippy montage effects that obviously they couldn't reproduce on the stage, but it was sort of unsurprising to see that aspect of it. It was the 60s. Director Richard Lester had worked with the Beatles on some of their movies, so you could kind of see that. But the film uses more or less the exact script from the stage show and just makes sort of a better use of the space and what a film can offer. Because of that, though, it also veers very easily into silliness beyond what the script even calls for, with, certain cast members going a little bit over the top, even for the farcical nature of the movie. But I thought it was a great movie, funny characters, good premise, very solid stuff. I leave it with an A. Justin?
A great musical walks the line between pure chaos, where logic can be thrown to the wall at a moment's notice, and strategic narrative brilliance. A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum steps up to the plate, and then some, with a great ensemble cast and some truly hilarious musical numbers. Now, I wish everyone got a bit more to do, perhaps in terms of balance. Buster Keaton sort of shows up and then essentially gets reduced to a running gag. It's effective, it's just, he's a running gag. But
literally.
But still, quite literally. But still, it's a very ahead of its time musical. I feel like the trippy effects, some were very effective, others were more or less somebody was just having fun in the editing room.
It just made me think I was like watching an episode of The Monkees or something.
Exactly.
It was sort of a staple for 60s TV back then.
It's like it's quirky and it's amusing, and clearly the people behind it are very good at editing. It's just, it's not driving the story forward, which is what it needs to be doing.
Yeah, I just kind of chalked it up to product of its time and left it at that.
But I do think this is a movie that continues to prove that you can be raunchy, but there has to be an art to it. And it requires a sort of strong connection between both the actors and the filmmakers making the movie. Mm-hmm. And I really do appreciate that. I leave A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum with an A-.
Okay. Joe, how about for you?
No, this was a very interesting one. I was very surprised. It was good to get an older musical that I actually never heard of before. And I like the musicals, especially from this era. Definitely ahead of its time in terms of dialogue and writing. I thought it definitely was racy, but I've always appreciated that in older films. I thought the cast was having a great time. Some really good performances here, some classics. A lot of good interplay, a lot of chemistry. I thought the comedy mostly did work very well. I liked most of the gags. I do feel like some of them might go on a little too long. Maybe there was a little bit too much repetition there. It made it seem a little bit of a drag towards the end there. For the most part, though, I was pretty on board with the plot and everything. It was very enjoyable. Quite a surprise. Thought it was very well edited for the time, certainly. And I loved some of the random musical numbers for sure were hilarious. In particular, I believe it was the maid sequence.
Oh, it's one of my favorite parts.
Everybody just breaks plot just to join it because the concept of everybody having a maid is just so great. That definitely was a bump up for me. I leave it with an A- as well, Justin.
I do agree that there's probably too many characters for what's needed.
Honestly, I really kind of feel like I'd benefit from a rewatch because some of the interplay with what was going on in some of the scenes, I got a little confused because there were so many things going on with everybody. Yes. I almost had a hard time keeping track, and I was thinking, Dan must have an easier time.
I felt the same way when I saw the stage show, so seeing this just a few days later really did kind of help me a little bit.
Because in all honesty, I was having a hard time keeping track of who was where and who was what. Like, I knew that there was silliness going on, but I'll admit I had a hard time keeping up with all of it. It was very fast-paced, which I think worked both for and against it. maybe a little too fast at points. So I don't know. I think it needs to leave a little time to set up that seat again. So I want to watch this again sometime, see if it works better the second time around.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Justin, did you find that to be a problem as well?
I did. I understand that this is also an ensemble piece, so it's sort of one of those where there's smoke, there's fire kind of scenarios. And I'm sure on a rewatch, even multiple, it gets a lot easier to figure out character motivation, who's where, who's doing what, and why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. But I gotta admit, it does get a little frenzied at times.
And I think that, Joe hit on that point. I think it is because of the fast-paced nature of it. I think if it was just like a regular musical, you'd be able to follow it fine with all the different characters. Mm-hmm. But because everybody's, going, some people we kind of see, they rush into a scene, they say a line or two, and then rush out.
And that's definitely something unique about it, but I wish that sometimes it would slow down, because I'll be honest, sometimes I'd forget the gag immediately. Like, okay, there's silliness, but I need to keep track of who's who and what's what.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, you also have this whole matter that it's not like they're using like 3 billion set pieces. Mm-mm. It's set between quite literally 3 separate structures, so a lot's going on in all 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot going on. It's very chaotic, very frenzied. Definitely the nature of it. It's cool.
Yeah,
it is. It is a little bit hard to swallow sometimes.
And this gentleman also directed, Joe, Superman 2 and 3.
Oh,
so
one of them's good.
2, right?
Well, ish, yeah.
Quest for Peace, is that what 2 is?
No, that's 4.
Okay, I don't know. Think about it. Superman 2 just called Superman 2.
So it's not the Richard Donner cut, but his cut is still pretty good. Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, good. That's glad we watched that. Great listener's choice. And we'll be doing another one for next month. So, listeners, think about what you might want to have us review here on the show. And you can let us know that on our YouTube channel or on the Facebook group, Film Fanatics, with an exclamation point. So we look forward to your suggestions. We're going to wrap it up with Baby Doll. That is this week's Oscar A to Z. It is from 1956, and it earned 4 nominations: Cinematography, Supporting Actress, Best Actress, and Screenplay. And it was not nominated for Director, but it actually won the Golden Globe for Best Director for Elia Kazan. Justin?
Carol Baker plays Baby Doll, a 19-year-old unhappily married for 2 years to Archie Lee, played by Carl Malden, based primarily on getting what the other has. However, when a stranger named Silva, played by Eli Wallach, who runs a cotton plantation syndicate, arrives, he immediately believes he might be able to get to Archie Lee's fortune through Baby Doll, and a battle of wits between the 3 ensues. While Carol Baker's far from the likes of Brando and James Dean, both of whom were Elia Kazan alumni, one thing has to be said: Kazan is truly a master filmmaker. I wish he had picked a better story, because I feel like this one took a long time to get going and has a few odd twists and turns, particularly when it starts heading into thriller territory at one point. But each scene pops with gorgeous cinematography, lighting, and a couple really good performances. I thought Eli Wallach in particular really did a good job. I feel like, though, the biggest issue with this one is it's another classic case of what works on the stage doesn't always translate well to film. This was done by, I believe this was a Tennessee Williams play, and that's obviously simple sets, very character driven, and that can work for film. But there's methods that can help bring that to life better than these scenarios. Not all the characters are necessarily likable, but when we're heading right out the gate and having very little reason to get behind either character, and sort of slowly heads into a matter of which character is the least despicable, it gets harder and harder to get behind it. You appreciate the cinematography, and like I said, some of the characters are really compelling at times, but it is a little bit of a struggle to get through, even for being a little bit gutsy for the 50s. I leave Baby Doll with a B-.
All right, Joe?
Yeah, I definitely agree, Justin. I think the film was very well shot. There's some beautiful cinematography and lighting here, and there's some decent performances. And you're right, the film certainly was gutsy for the time. I think that it definitely did delve into some thriller territory there. There definitely was some potentially interesting plot points in here, and I think initially it starts off kind of interesting commentary on the issues in marriage, and there's some racial tensions and issues with workers. There's definitely some good themes here, but I think as the characters kind of converge with each other, they do become more unlikable. And honestly, I think the plot kind of loses itself at some point, just becomes a little less interesting, because honestly, the more romantic it gets, I think the less compelling the characters are. And unfortunately, I think the biggest detractor for it for me was that the main character is probably the most despicable, and honestly, the fact that her actress is not that good, honestly, I thought her performance was pretty weak for the most part, definitely hurt the crux of the movie, and I didn't really like what it ultimately boiled down to, kind of an anti-climax, I would call it. So, all in all, about half the movie was interesting. There was some excellent cinematography and gutsy ideas, you're right, but on the whole, I didn't think the story of the characters were ultimately compelling for me to care. I leave it with a C+.
I do think there's a lot of interesting things happening, and it's obvious why there was this, at the time, semi-successful campaign to ban it from American cinemas. It's definitely got a lot of, you guys said it, gutsy, risky ideas, risque ideas, I should say. Mm-hmm. But like Justin said, none of the characters are all that likable. So it's hard to know who we're supposed to even get behind. And it does take so long to get interesting. The conclusion is good. The last few scenes are really well done, but I don't think that they're so great that it's worth waiting for. Mm-hmm. We have to wade through a lot to get there. I'm also shocked that this is listed as a comedy. I didn't find it very funny at all, and I didn't think it was meant to be, really. It seemed more of a dramatic thriller, I would
Perhaps
say.
Perhaps a satire?
That's sort of what it's like, quote-unquote, listed as, like, on Wikipedia, and I guess on IMDb as well, but a satire on what exactly? Like marriage?
That's what I figured, like, social commentary on whether or not marriage can be anything but a social contract.
I guess. I mean, I thought it was, to me, it was more dramatic and less satirical, but I do agree, Joe, that the actress playing Baby Doll, I can't believe this lady got nominated for anything.
Not at all.
We try to watch, if they have an old trailer on the DVD or on the Amazon Instant, we watch the trailer, and this trailer was like, oh, here's the next Brando for you, next James Dean, as Justin mentioned, Kazan alums both, and boy, I just thought she was bad. Brando, she was not, most certainly. I leave the movie with a C+. I think there's a lot of interesting things. It's certainly gutsy, but,
I think the nomination
takes way too long.
I think the nomination was more or less sort of just out of, like, the sort of playing off the whole gutsy matter of the role. Like, oh, she's heading into this super gritty and darker territory than what we're used to with these more uplifting comedies and...
Possibly, but she didn't play it very well. I think that's, kind of a problem.
Not to mention when you're obviously in the hands of Elia Kazan, was getting more and more recognition as time went on. Won for Best Picture with On the Waterfront.
Yeah, but that's what surprises me about the nominations. He wasn't even nominated for Best Director.
Which shocks me to my core.
The directing is one of the best elements of the film.
Easily.
Yeah.
Clearly, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, that's sort of surprising they're going to nominate. Now, look, it was 1956. I don't know what else came out that year. Who knows? Maybe there was a ton of great directors and crappy actresses. So that's why it went that way. But I'm shocked that she got nominated, especially if he did not.
Yeah, that one I don't know what to say. I'm glad the Golden Globes were...
Yeah, they're usually on top of it, to be completely honest.
Always.
I will say that. I just feel like this is going to be one of those movies. I know it's so early in the Bees. This is what, number 3 or 4 that we've seen?
Babe, Babble, yeah.
Bees. So, okay. But in, a couple years or whatever, if we do the Bee wrap-up, this is going to be one I am just not going to remember.
Not even a little bit.
Maybe because it's called Baby Doll and, she's on the poster sucking her thumb, I'll remember that.
That's about it.
But, yeah, it's a very unmemorable movie, I think.
Sadly.
Yeah.
America, it's not.
I did kind of forget about that one, too.
Aww.
I liked it.
But, yeah, you did. All right, well, anyway, that is going to wrap it up for this week. I did mention the YouTube channel already, so if you have not subscribed to that yet, go ahead and do so. We have our Facebook group up and running, which I also mentioned, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. The Twitter is @FilmFanaticsPod. And very shortly, we're going to start doing these Boldly Going episodes, tackling all these Star Trek, different series of Star Treks, the original, Next Gen, so on and so forth, except for Enterprise.
Eventually, maybe.
Joe's least favorite, but maybe eventually.
We'll go by what's most essential.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye.